Their strength will be renewed. They will soar on wings like eagles. Isaiah 40 verse 31. I have seen how your steps have become slow and how the weight of time has tried to extinguish the fire that once burned within you. But in this very moment, I declare over you a renewal of strength that does not come from the earth but from the eternal power that dwells on high. What seemed extinguished will be ignited again, and what seemed lost will be found once more. For my power is not weakened by human fatigue. On the contrary, it is perfected in the midst of it. I have allowed you to reach the edge of exhaustion not to destroy you, but to show you that true strength is born when nothing remains but my presence. Many rely on their energy, reasoning, or achievements, but those who surrender before me discover a fire that never goes out. That fire is returning to you right now, like wind stirring the sleeping embers on the altar of the heart. Your mind has heard voices saying it is not worth continuing, that faith has lost its meaning. But my word rises above all doubt and proclaims that there is still purpose, still promise, still a path ahead. What fatigue tried to bury will be lifted in glory. Within you, the ruins of discouragement are turning into a temple of unshakable trust. For my power needs no rest, my fire never fades. I have seen your nights where silence weighs heavier than sleep, when the soul speaks in sighs instead of words. But even in that silence, I am at work. Even when you believe nothing is happening, my spirit is rebuilding your faith from the foundations. I have not left you in abandonment, I have brought you to the threshold of a miracle. Exhaustion was only the doorway that led you to the encounter with my strength. No one can renew what they do not recognize they have lost. That is why I allowed you to feel the weariness, so that you would understand that your vigor does not come from man but from heaven. Now, in this moment, my power pours over you like a river of fire, cleansing the dust of discouragement and restoring the brightness of hope. Everything you thought had withered will begin to bloom again. Every word of defeat will become a testimony of renewal. Fatigue made you look back and doubt the future, but I release over you a new vision. You will no longer see life through defeat but through fulfilled promise. The faith that seemed asleep will rise like a giant. You will no longer walk dragging the feet of your soul, but you will run with the lightness of one renewed by the eternal. My power does not push you, it lifts you. My fire does not burn to destroy but to purify. Today I declare over you a time of deep restoration. Where there were complaints, there will now be gratitude. Where fear reigned, courage will arise. Where exhaustion dominated, divine energy will spring forth. I will infuse you with a strength that does not come from emotion but from faith. It will not be a fleeting impulse, but a constant current flowing within you. Thus you will know that the miracle is not merely to endure but to be reborn with purpose. The wounds of effort are not marks of defeat but signs of growth. The tears you shed were not in vain, for they watered the ground where now a purer faith blossoms. I am raising a generation that does not surrender to fatigue but finds power in surrender. You are part of that glorious movement. Every step you take will be guided by the light of my promise and not by the weight of your weariness. I have prepared a new rhythm for you. You will not advance in haste but in constancy. You will not depend on human motivation but on the eternal pulse of my word. When everything seems to stop, you will hear within yourself a call saying, "Continue." That impulse will not come from desire but from the fire I have kindled deep within. For the miracle I perform does not only renew your body but transforms your way of believing. Your surroundings will change when your inner being changes. Those who once saw your faith falter will now witness an unexplainable firmness. They will not understand how you keep moving forward, but you will know that my presence is the source. Weariness will be replaced by conviction and doubt by certainty. Every defeating thought will dissolve in the river of my truth. For when my power acts, it leaves no trace of weakness, only signs of glory. I have watched as you tried to keep faith alive by your own strength, like someone shielding a weak flame against the wind. But it was not your effort that kept the spark alive, it was my grace covering you in secret. Now I blow with heavenly strength upon that flame, and it becomes a blazing fire. That fire will illuminate your steps and ignite hope in others. What seemed to be ending in you was actually being prepared to multiply. I lead you toward a new ground where trust does not depend on outcomes but on my promise. Do not seek human signs to believe. See the faithfulness that has already sustained you. Fatigue is not the end but the transition toward renewal. Every breath you take is evidence that I am still working. Do not fear when your strength fades, for that is where my intervention begins. Today I declare that your faith rises again, that your voice speaks without trembling, that your thoughts align with my will, that your heart beats to the rhythm of my purpose. I envelop you in an atmosphere of spiritual rebirth where nothing can stop you. Neither sadness, nor doubt, nor prolonged waiting. For the hope I give does not wither with the seasons. It stands firm like an eternal rock. What exhausted you yesterday will no longer have power over you. The words that wounded you will lose their weight. The memories that drained your energy will be transformed into impulses of faith. You will see clearly what was once clouded. You will feel that every step has meaning because everything in your story is being redeemed by my love. Fatigue will not be your identity but the point from which your new strength emerges. Your spirit rises with determination. You no longer walk blindly but are guided by an inner light that does not go out. That light is proof that I have intervened. There will be no night dark enough to extinguish the brilliance I have kindled, nor burden heavy enough to break your soul. For the renewed faith that now dwells within you does not depend on the visible, but on the invisible certainty of my power. I declare that your thoughts are cleansed of every negative voice. Every doubt dissolves before the evidence of my faithfulness. Despair retreats, faith advances. The inner fire I have ignited will not be extinguished by fear, physical fatigue, or routine. It will be a constant flame that drives you to believe even when you see no immediate results. That is the renewed faith that transforms the ordinary into a miracle. I lead you into a dimension where faith is no longer about waiting for something but about dwelling in the certainty that all is under control. That confidence is not learned in abundance but in the desert. Yet now the desert blooms. What was once dryness becomes fertile ground. Your prayer becomes song. Your exhaustion becomes momentum. Your story becomes testimony. I will allow others to see the difference in you, not for your glory, but so they may know that the fire of heaven still renews those who surrender to my power. You will be a living reflection of what happens when an exhausted faith is touched by the eternal. Every word you speak will carry the fragrance of hope, and wherever you speak there will be life. For I have decided that your faith will become a fountain for many. The time of weakness has ended. What once held you back now propels you forward. What once made you doubt now confirms you. For I have placed within you an indomitable spirit, forged in stillness, strengthened in trial, and ignited in my glory. No one will be able to extinguish what I have set aflame. This is the beginning of your renewal, the awakening of a faith that does not give up, the manifestation of a miracle that is not limited to a moment but transforms an entire life. And from this day on, every sunrise will be proof that my power was perfected in your weariness and lifted you up in glory. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Psalm 23 verse 4. There are moments when silence feels like a wall, when the soul cries out and hears no reply, and it is there that many believe they've been forgotten. But I declare from eternity that nothing belonging to you has been ignored, and every word spoken in the midst of pain has been recorded in the book of fulfillment. I have not been silent out of neglect, but out of purpose. For the silence you so greatly fear has been preparing the atmosphere for a revelation greater than your tears. I have allowed the apparent emptiness to expand your capacity to believe. When you do not hear my voice, it is because I am tuning your ear to distinguish my whisper among the noise of the world. While you feel the heavens are closed, I am building a new door, wider and more glorious. I have not left you in the shadow, I have hidden you within my plan. The stillness you perceive is not abandonment but an incubator where your faith is being strengthened in secret. What you call silence, heaven calls preparation. The delays that frustrate you are the exact seasons where I shape you to sustain what I promised. Had I responded earlier, you would have received without understanding. But now, when waiting has worn down your logic and stripped away your strength, you are ready to receive without claiming the credit. The miracle on its way will not be the result of chance, but the fruit of the fire that refined you. Many cry for quick answers, but deep roots grow in the dark. So while you thought nothing was happening, I was rooting you in unshakable faith. The voice that seemed absent never stopped surrounding you. Every breath you took was accompanied by my invisible presence. I was never far. I was silently working out the details of what will now be revealed. For my faithfulness is not announced with noise but proven through fulfillment. You thought the delay was punishment, but it has been protection. Had I opened certain doors before their time, you would not have been able to bear their weight. That is why I stopped some paths, silenced some voices, and paused some opportunities. It was not forgetfulness, it was strategy. I covered you with silence so that no one could destroy what was germinating within you. Every day of uncertainty formed a deeper root of trust, and that root is the foundation of the miracle now approaching. In the days when heaven seemed indifferent, I held together what you could not see. When your hands lifted with no response, my angels were moving in the unseen. While you thought nothing was shifting, heaven's clock was ticking with precision. Not one promise fell to the ground, it was simply waiting for its appointed hour. The hope you thought was dead is about to resurrect with multiplied strength. For everything that seems lost in my silence is reborn in greater glory when I speak. Heaven has not been quiet from lack of care, but because the echo of your faith needed to mature. Not every silence is absence, some are the language of purpose. While you asked, "Where are you?" I was sustaining what was to come. My presence is not bound to sound, nor my power to emotion. Even when you do not feel me, I continue to act. The miracle of renewed faith does not emerge from the noise of excitement, but from the power that rises when you trust without seeing. I have seen how your heart has wavered, how tears have mingled with prayer. Yet I have not forgotten a single word. Every cry has been a seed in the soil of eternity, and its fruit will appear at the right time. It is not about when I speak, but what I prepare while remaining silent. I have been shaping you through every unanswered day, forming within you a resilience that the world cannot break. Do not fear if the doors are still closed. Do not think your effort was wasted. Heaven does not operate under human haste. Earthly clocks count seconds, mine counts destinies. And when the hour arrives, what once seemed late will prove perfect. For nothing delays in my hands. The miracle you are about to witness will not come with warning, but with eternal impact. While others looked at you with doubt, I watched you with purpose. They saw inactivity, I saw preparation. They thought you were standing still, I knew you were being forged. The seasons of silence are what separate the ordinary from the extraordinary, and you were chosen for the extraordinary. I have not forgotten your steps or your sighs. I have been in each one, guiding you toward the fulfillment of what I declared. I have decreed over your life a rebirth of faith. It is not about feeling me, but knowing that my faithfulness does not depend on your emotions. Even when heaven seems silent, my word has not lost its power. It remains alive, traveling through time, crossing distances, awaiting the perfect moment to manifest. And that moment draws near. The signs you've waited for will come, but not as you imagine. They will appear in the ordinary, shine through the simple, and surprise you in the everyday. Every doubt that attacked you will become testimony of victory. Every silence that hurt you will be remembered as the prelude to revelation. There is no emptiness I cannot fill, no question without its answer in due season. My faithfulness is not measured by what you feel, but by what I accomplish, and I am accomplishing it. The threads that seemed loose are now weaving together into a design of glory. What you could not understand will soon be clear. What seemed confusion will become certainty. Heaven has not been silent, it has been speaking differently. I spoke through the details, through unexpected encounters, through the pauses that forced you to stop. I spoke in the sigh that kept you alive, in the peace you could not explain, in the strength that appeared just before you gave up. Each day without response was a conversation between your faith and my eternity, and that conversation is about to become a visible miracle. The time of believing without seeing is drawing to a close. Soon you will witness with your own eyes what your spirit sustained in the silence. And when it happens, you will understand that you were never forgotten for a single moment. I have been behind every scene, moving what you could not move, opening what you could not open. The delay was only a strategy to show you that faith is not the echo of emotion, but the force that walks through darkness without losing direction. Your faith is being crowned with results. Your perseverance is being rewarded. Heaven did not stay silent in disdain, it stayed silent to solidify your trust. For a faith that has survived silence can withstand any storm, and that is the faith now awakening in you, strong, mature, unbreakable. I cover you with the security of my purpose. Everything that seems still begins to move. The winds of fulfillment blow from every direction, bringing promises, restoring opportunities, igniting hope. What was motionless receives life. What silence contained is now released. For my word does not return void. It accomplishes its purpose and manifests in glory. I declare that the days of uncertainty are ending. The dawn of response approaches. The faith you thought was lost transforms into renewed fire. That fire will light your next steps, burn away doubt, and ignite your spirit with a strength no one can extinguish. Heaven's silence ends and the voice of fulfillment resounds. For I never forgot you, not for a single instant. I only waited for the exact moment to show you that my faithfulness has no interruptions. Now heaven responds, and it does so with power. The promises that seemed distant begin to unfold. The prayers kept in silence become visible miracles. The time of believing without signs has birthed within you an indestructible faith. And that faith will be the foundation of a new beginning, one in which you will never again doubt my presence, for you will know that even when all else is silent, heaven never forgets. All things are possible through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4 verse 13. What once seemed impossible to carry will now be lifted by a power that transcends human frailty. Every burden the world placed upon your shoulders will not outweigh the strength that is poured from above. When exhaustion threatened to break you, I had already begun to uphold everything your hands could no longer hold. It does not depend on your endurance or your ability, it depends on the strength that flows from the eternal. The days of effort without reward were not wasted, but preparation to receive what once seemed unreachable. Everything that became heavy in your life was destined to show that your strength alone was never enough to sustain it. Every apparent failure, every unsuccessful attempt, was the prelude to a rising that can only come from the source that never fails. Where your hands let go, my invisible yet absolute intervention is revealed. When you thought all was lost, every detail was being placed perfectly by my hands. The fragments of your story, broken and scattered, were being united by a power that neither tires nor falters. What seemed fragile becomes a firm foundation. What seemed finished becomes a new beginning. The faith that once seemed dim will burn again with renewed strength, and the light that springs from this rebirth will transform everything around you. Extreme weariness does not define your destiny. It marks the preparation you received while it seemed you were standing still. Every tear shed, every thought of defeat, was absorbed by eternity to be turned into fuel for your faith. There will be no room for doubt where my strength unfolds, and what once seemed insurmountable will be overcome with glory. The hand that holds what your hands cannot lift does not know weakness, and now it acts upon every area of your life. The challenges that overwhelmed you and the responsibilities that seemed impossible to bear, all are now being lifted by my power. Your spirit will be restored, your heart reinforced, and your mind aligned with the certainty that the intervention coming forth does not depend on your efforts but on the strength flowing from the eternal. Nothing that was lost will be ignored. Everything will find its place in due time, and all will be greater than you imagined. Every moment when you felt the weight of the world pressing down was a space where my power was quietly manifesting. Each time hope seemed to fade, I was already working to sustain the life of your faith. Everything that once felt out of reach will now be placed in your hands anew, and what once seemed broken will be restored in perfection. The faith awakening within you now will become evidence that unseen strength is working on your behalf. You will not depend on your own vigor or your own plans. You will witness a miracle that flows from the fountain of power that never runs dry. Everything that was heavy now becomes light. Everything that once seemed immovable shifts easily when my strength is set in motion. Every obstacle that appeared to block your path will be removed, and every door that closed will open gloriously. The renewal of your faith will not be partial, it will be complete. It will not only be about seeing the impossible resolved but about experiencing how every collapsed area rises again through a power not born of you but from the strength that sustains you. What once seemed like a distant dream will become reality. Every promise kept in silence will be revealed, and the life that once seemed confined will expand under the influence of limitless power. The process of sustaining what once seemed lost is not instant, but it is perfect. Every step that once felt useless, every weight that seemed endless, now transforms into preparation for your faith to be fully activated. The weaknesses you once perceived within yourself dissolve when held by eternity, and what once felt insufficient becomes more than enough when my strength works. What your hands could not lift in the past now receives a thrust you could never create on your own. The burdens that once seemed to crush you will be carried on a river of grace, and what once felt unattainable will now be reached with ease. Every part of your life that seemed abandoned will be redeemed, and what was once lost will become testimony to a power greater than any human limitation. There is no weight too heavy, no burden too great. Everything that feels exhausting will be revitalized. Every resistance of the world will be overcome, and every opposing force will become proof that renewed faith stands upon what cannot be seen but holds absolute power. The hope that once seemed to fade will now turn into a fire that never goes out. What your hands could not sustain, I lift with glorious constancy. Every detail of your life is being placed with precision, and everything that was lost will not only be recovered but elevated with greater strength, displaying the magnitude of the faith that is being renewed in you. The miracle of renewed faith does not depend on your abilities or your might, but on the certainty that what once seemed fallen will be lifted with power that knows no end. The burden that once felt impossible to bear turns into victory, and weakness becomes the testimony of the strength that sustains what was never meant to rest upon your hands alone. When the impossible becomes possible, your life will reflect the power that upholds every fall, every struggle, and every challenge. Nothing is left unrestored, nothing untouched by intervention. What your hands could not sustain will be lifted and multiplied in glory, and the faith that once seemed extinguished will now blaze with light that touches everything around it. I declare that today's burden will become tomorrow's victory. What was heavy will turn light, what was dark will fill with light, and what once seemed impossible will now manifest with glorious power. Every step that once seemed weak will now be strengthened, and every area that once seemed broken will be restored with firmness. Renewed faith is not measured by human strength but by the assurance that what seemed lost is being sustained and lifted by eternal power. Every challenge will become an opportunity, every fall a step toward glory, and every effort a testimony that what once seemed impossible has been upheld and raised for your benefit. The intervention that sustains what your hands could not lift is complete, steadfast, and glorious. Every weight, every hardship, every broken part is touched by power that never tires, and what once seemed lost will rise so that renewed faith may shine with unmatched strength. A new season begins today, one where what once seemed unreachable becomes reality, where every burden you thought you could not bear is lifted by strength that transcends the human. What was once broken will be restored, and the faith that once seemed weak will now burn with fire that cannot be extinguished. The manifestation of this miracle in your life will be the testimony that everything which once seemed impossible to sustain has been lifted with absolute power, with glorious certainty, and with the fullness of a miracle that renews faith from the deepest part of your spirit. For the Lord your God is in your midst, mighty to save. He will rejoice over you with gladness, he will quiet you with his love, he will rejoice over you with singing. Zephaniah 3 verse 17. The fire that once seemed extinguished within you will begin to burn with renewed intensity. Every corner of your soul where discouragement once settled will now be illuminated by a light that knows no shadow. What once appeared to be a fragile thread of faith will become an indomitable flame. The strength that manifests within your spirit does not depend on circumstances but on a power that transcends every human limitation. The faith that once wavered will receive a breath that transforms doubt into certainty, weakness into strength, and waiting into victory. Every experience of discouragement you faced was designed to prepare the spark of this fire. Those disappointments that seemed to halt your progress were shaping the endurance needed for your faith to emerge unshaken and brighter than before. The patience you thought endless was a crucible where hope was refined. Now the time of endurance becomes the time of expansion. The thread of faith you once held now weaves itself into a torch that will illuminate your steps and the steps of those who walk beside you. The transformation of your faith will not be gradual or partial. It will be complete. What once seemed extinguished now shines with a brilliance that drives away shadows, breaks invisible chains, and establishes a secure path even in the midst of storms. Every inner tremor, every insecurity, every fracture from the past will be covered by a fire that does not weaken. This fire does not burn to destroy. It purifies, strengthens, and prepares everything for an advance that will surpass every expectation. The trials that once seemed endless, the obstacles that appeared one after another, now become the very fuel for this fire. Fatigue and discouragement will not diminish your flame. On the contrary, they will become the opportunity for the inner fire to manifest even more powerfully. Every challenge will stand as evidence that the impossible becomes reality when faith ignites with power not born of human effort but of the eternal force that acts beyond the visible. Renewed faith is not measured by what you can do but by the certainty that lives within your spirit. What once seemed fragile now carries strength and purpose. Every thought that once doubted your destiny will be purified by this fire, and every fear will be replaced by clarity. What once seemed lost reorganizes and takes its rightful place under the strength of this renewed faith. No obstacle will be great enough to extinguish this flame, nor circumstance strong enough to dim it. The fire that now burns within you is not only for your benefit, it will become light and guidance for others. Faith ignited transforms spaces, lifts burdens, opens paths, and breaks barriers. Those around you will witness a living testimony, proof that what once seemed dormant and weak rises again with power and determination. The manifestation of this faith will not be silent. It will be a proclamation of victory that impacts lives and sets a new standard of confidence and hope. Times of doubt and fear will be left behind. Every memory of helplessness will turn into testimony of my work in your life. The burning faith that now arises is proof that hopelessness never had the final word. Every area where discouragement tried to settle will be touched by this fire. Everything that once seemed insufficient will now be more than enough. Everything that seemed lost will be recovered and multiplied. Faith is no longer just a concept. It becomes a living force that drives every decision, every action, every step you take. The fire of your faith does not arise from your own effort but from intervention that turns weakness into strength. Everything that once seemed to fade in your spirit will now be filled with light and warmth. Every negative thought will be consumed and replaced by clarity and purpose. Every stagnant area of your life will be revitalized and set into motion. Everything that once seemed inactive will gain energy, and everything that once felt weak will be strengthened with enduring power. Every word you speak, every thought you form, every action you take will carry the reflection of this fire. The faith that now burns within you knows no hesitation or doubt. It does not depend on circumstances or human approval. It depends on the power that manifests with clarity and authority. Everything that once seemed fragile will become testimony of the intervention that works beyond what eyes can see. Fire does not merely illuminate, it transforms. What once seemed aimless now gains direction. What once seemed broken now becomes whole. What once seemed limited now expands. The faith set ablaze opens paths where there were none, breaks chains that once seemed unbreakable, and establishes victories that once seemed impossible. What once made you doubt is now proof of the strength that sustains and raises what once seemed lost. Every trial you have gone through will be redefined by this fire. Difficulties will become the steps that lift you to new heights. Fatigue and pain will be transmuted into momentum, and every effort will be amplified by the strength that flows from eternity. Everything that once seemed motionless now moves. Everything that once seemed extinguished now revives with intensity, and everything that once seemed over now begins anew with glory. The faith that now burns is neither temporary nor fragile. Its light and warmth will endure through the days, strengthening every decision, guiding every step, and establishing a clear purpose in every action. Every area of your life will be illuminated by this faith, and every heart that draws near will be touched by its evidence. There will be no place for doubt, for the fire will bring conviction, clarity, and assurance. The miracle of renewed faith is not a fleeting emotion, it is a transforming force. What once seemed extinguished in your heart now becomes the driving force of your life. Certainty replaces fear, light replaces darkness, and motion replaces stagnation. Every challenge that arises will be faced with strength and clarity, and every obstacle that once seemed insurmountable will be overcome. The faith that burns now acts from the depths of the spirit. It is not seen only in words but in actions, decisions, and results. Every area that once seemed stagnant will move again, and every doubt that once limited you will be replaced by firm confidence. Everything that once seemed lost will be lifted and established, and every step you take will be guided by this renewing force. The fire of your faith does not depend on your effort. It depends on the strength that sustains what once seemed impossible to sustain. Every part of your life that was weakened, dimmed, or stuck will receive new energy and direction. What once seemed useless will now become valuable, what once seemed lost will be multiplied, and what once seemed limited will expand with glory. This fire does not only transform your life, it influences others. Every person who witnesses your faith will see evidence of power that acts beyond the natural. What once seemed weak and vulnerable now becomes a testimony of strength, direction, and purpose. Every action, every word, every thought will carry the reflection of the faith that now burns with renewed power. The renewal of faith brings clarity, strength, and victory. Everything that once seemed weak is now strengthened, everything that once seemed lost is recovered, and everything that once seemed extinguished now revives with intensity. Every challenge is overcome, every obstacle removed, and every area of your life is illuminated by this fire that turns doubt into certainty and fear into forward motion. The fire of your faith establishes a new level of living. Everything that once seemed limited now expands, everything that once seemed still now moves, and everything that once seemed extinguished now burns with strength. Every step you take will be guided by this renewed faith, and every action will stand as testimony of the miracle that works beyond what can be seen. Every tear, every exhaustion, and every trial will be replaced by the strength of the fire that now burns within you. What once seemed impossible to sustain will now rise with power and clarity. Renewed faith becomes the engine behind every action, the impulse behind every step, and the light that guides every decision. This fire does not go out. It does not weaken. It does not depend on circumstances or human approval. It is a power that acts with continuous strength, transforming everything it touches, renewing every area of your life, and establishing a testimony of faith that transcends time and circumstance. What once seemed lost now rises, what once seemed extinguished now lives again, and what once seemed weak now becomes strong. The faith that now burns becomes a torch that lights your path and the paths of others. Every area of your life receives new energy, every challenge is faced with strength, and every obstacle is overcome with power. The miracle of renewed faith works gloriously, triumphantly, and continually. I will restore you to health and heal your wounds, declares the Lord. Jeremiah 30 verse 17. Where human eyes can only see desolation, I declare life and breathe hope. The ruins that seem permanent are fertile ground for the manifestation of my power. Every fallen stone, every closed door, every dream that seemed extinguished becomes the seed of a miracle that defies the natural. The limited vision of the world cannot comprehend the work I begin in the heart of the one who believed all possibility was lost. While others see destruction, I see foundations ready to raise what your spirit was destined to uphold. The place where hopelessness once reigned will be transformed into a sanctuary of faith and victory. Every fragment that seemed beyond repair is now touched by a force that rebuilds with divine precision. What was discarded, marginalized, or ignored will not remain so. Everything that seemed stagnant comes to life, and what seemed dead rises with a power that no human judgment can foresee. Life flows where once there was only silence, and every dark corner will be illuminated with renewed glory. When the eyes of others see impossibility, my word breaks barriers and establishes new realities. What seemed to be the end is now the beginning. Every ruin is a field of intervention for faith that is renewed. The land that seemed barren will produce abundant fruit, and every action that seemed useless will be magnified to show that nothing escapes my authority. My power knows no defeat. Even where everything seems finished, life rises with a force that surpasses human understanding. The structures that discouragement built will be replaced by edifices of hope and purpose. The debris of broken promises will be gathered and reorganized. Every experience of failure becomes a teacher that reveals the endurance of faith. Every tear shed becomes water that nourishes the soil of eternity. What seemed lost in ruin will be placed back in its place with magnificence, and the life that emerges will not be fleeting but permanent and abundant. Renewed faith acts in the invisible and manifests in the tangible. Every space where others see only ruin will be taken by power that lifts, renews, and glorifies. What seemed impossible to restore now opens before your eyes as testimony of the intervention that transcends the natural. What was unable to bear fruit fills with life and purpose, and every fall that seemed final becomes a step toward victory. What was forgotten by human logic now receives attention from eternity. The strength that revives the dead and lifts the fallen is not measured by the opinions of those around but by the certainty that the impossible becomes possible when faith is renewed from the source of all power. Every abandoned fragment will be set in order, and every story that seemed lost will be transformed into a testimony of glory. When others see collapsed walls, I see walls prepared to receive restoration. When others see desert, I see fertile ground for hope to spring forth. Every obstacle that seemed invincible will be removed, and every challenge that seemed hopeless will be turned into a path of growth. The intervention that acts where there are only ruins does not depend on circumstances but on power that manifests beyond all human logic. The miracle of renewed faith transforms perception. What was impossible to limited sight becomes possible when I intervene. Every desolate space in your life will be touched with vitality and purpose. What seemed finished will be restarted with strength, and every area where hopelessness reigned will now be a refuge of faith and confidence. Life does not just return, it multiplies in abundance, and the faith that seemed extinguished now burns with intensity. The ruins become stages of glory. What was once a symbol of defeat becomes a monument of victory. Every stone that seemed fallen rises as a testimony that renewed faith sustains what once seemed lost. The intervention that acts in the impossible establishes a pattern of triumph and reveals that my power has no limits. Every space, every relationship, every project that seemed condemned is now strengthened, and the life that emerges exceeds all expectation. Every memory of failure, every wound that seemed open, every apparent loss is transformed into evidence that the impossible is renewed with power. The faith that now manifests does not depend on human effort but on the certainty that where others see ruins, I declare life. Every abandoned fragment is reorganized with precision, and every step that seemed uncertain is now guided with firmness toward the manifestation of miracles. Those who doubted will witness the transformation. What seemed impenetrable now opens. What seemed immovable now shifts with purpose. Every area that seemed destined to fail will be lifted in glory. The faith that is reborn becomes guide, light, and strength that sustains not only the one who possesses it but also those who observe the work in action. Every step that once seemed unsure is now taken with certainty, and every challenge is overcome with power that transcends the human. Every word once forgotten, every dream that seemed extinguished, every promise that seemed unfulfilled will all be restored and exalted with a power that knows no limit. The renewed faith that now dwells within acts as a torch that lights the darkness and brings strength where once there was only emptiness. Every fragment of your story that seemed ruin is now testimony of manifested glory. The intervention that acts in places of ruin recognizes no limitations. Every effort that seemed futile multiplies, every resource that seemed insufficient is completed, and every area that seemed broken is strengthened. The faith that is reborn is not fleeting. It establishes itself as a constant force that transforms every space of your life. Everything that once seemed lost rises with power, and every challenge becomes an opportunity for testimony. Places of desolation fill with life and purpose. Every difficulty that seemed final becomes a step toward victory. Renewed faith sustains what seemed impossible, and every experience of discouragement becomes evidence of intervention acting with glorious power. What was once ruin is now fertile ground for miracles, and every step you take reflects the strength that moves beyond what is visible. Every area where it seemed impossible to advance now opens with clarity. Every challenge that seemed insurmountable is now faced with strength and conviction. Every space where there seemed to be no hope now receives light, direction, and purpose. The faith that is renewed transforms the impossible into possible, and every fragment that seemed abandoned now rises with power that knows no end. The life that springs forth where once there were only ruins does not depend on human will but on the force that acts from eternity. Everything that seemed lost will be restored, everything that seemed extinguished will regain intensity, and everything that seemed limited will expand. Renewed faith not only sustains but propels, illuminates, and transforms every aspect of existence. Where others see an end, I speak of a beginning. Where others see death, I speak of life. Where others see impossibility, I speak of miracle. The faith that is renewed acts in the invisible and manifests in the tangible. Every fragment of your life that seemed destroyed now becomes evidence of power, victory, and glory. Everything that seemed lost rises with renewed strength and eternal purpose. The miracle that acts in the ruins manifests in glory. Every area that seemed unreachable is now conquered. Every obstacle that seemed invincible is now overcome. Every space where hopelessness once existed now receives light and life. Renewed faith transforms what was destruction into testimony of victory, and what was loss into evidence of glorious intervention. Those who observe will not understand how the impossible became reality, but they will see the result. Every fallen stone is now a foundation, every void is now a space of abundance, and every area that seemed barren now produces fruit. What once seemed ruin is now manifested glory, and the faith that is renewed acts as a force that sustains, transforms, and lifts every aspect of life. Nothing remains unchanged where renewed faith intervenes. Every memory of defeat becomes a story of victory. Every space of desolation fills with life. Every obstacle that seemed insurmountable becomes a step toward the manifestation of miracles. The intervention that acts where there were only ruins ensures that everything that seemed lost will be lifted with glory, strength, and purpose. In all our troubles, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble. 2 Corinthians 1 verse 4. Every tear shed will not go unnoticed nor be lost in the void of time. Every drop that once seemed a sign of defeat will be turned into evidence of victory. What once appeared as pain without purpose now becomes a bridge toward the manifestation of miracles. The tears that accompanied your silent nights, the sighs that carried your soul, every moment when discouragement touched your spirit, all will be transformed into testimony that illuminates, strengthens, and sets free. The suffering that seemed eternal and overwhelming will be reinterpreted as a stage of preparation. Every tear that appeared to signal failure is, in truth, a seed of faith germinating under tireless intervention. What seemed useless and barren becomes abundant fruit. Every feeling of helplessness, every night of anguish, every moment of deep sadness will be transformed into tangible evidence that faith can be reborn even in the most adverse scenarios. When pain seemed to defeat you and hopelessness appeared invincible, every tear was recorded and considered. There will be no weeping without purpose, nor anguish without direction. Everything that seemed to fail will be set in order, every experience of crying will become a lesson, and every wound will become a testimony of restoration. Renewed faith emerges as the Spirit recognizes the transformation that acts beyond what is visible. Every tear becomes a message, every sigh a proclamation of victory. What once seemed mere affliction now stands as evidence that even in pain, power and purpose are revealed. What seemed like loss becomes the discovery of inner strength. Every place where sadness once ruled now receives clarity, direction, and healing. Renewed faith not only comforts but establishes platforms of triumph in spaces that once seemed uninhabitable. The miracle of renewed faith acts in every fragment of your story. What seemed useless will become vital. What seemed broken will now be a fundamental piece of a greater testimony. Every tear that seemed insignificant now rises as evidence of the intervention that transforms the vulnerable into the glorious. Every moment of suffering becomes a lesson in perseverance, and every challenge overcome becomes a light that guides others toward hope and certainty. The process of transformation does not depend on your understanding or your effort. Every experience of pain, every sensation of defeat, Every fall will be elevated by a force that transcends all human limitation. What once seemed to dry the soul now fills it with determination. What once seemed to darken the vision now illuminates the path. And what once seemed defeated now becomes the starting point of a testimony of faith. Every tear that flowed without comfort becomes a source of strength. The sadness that seemed eternal turns into momentum. Every experience that seemed a failure now becomes a step toward victory. What once seemed useless is now evidence. What seemed fleeting becomes permanent, and what seemed dark now shines with glory. Every tear shed has a purpose, and every feeling of helplessness becomes a force that propels you forward. Faith that is renewed finds in every tear an opportunity to grow. No shadow will stop the manifestation of life, nor will any pain hinder the expansion of the spirit. Every emotion that once seemed to break you now becomes an element of testimony. Every instant when crying seemed to prevail will be replaced by clarity and victory. What once seemed weakening is now a source of power, and what once seemed impossible is now attainable. Every tear once perceived as useless now holds eternal meaning. What once appeared to express defeat now stands as evidence of strength manifested in action, word, and thought. Renewed faith transforms every experience of weeping into a lesson of perseverance, every moment of anguish into evidence of intervention, and every dark night into a dawn of glory. What once seemed collapsed now rises with authority. Every tear is a testimony that power acts where human strength seemed limited. Every suffering is reinterpreted as preparation for victory, and every space of pain becomes a platform of manifestation. Renewed faith transforms vulnerability into strength and weeping into a proclamation of glory. Every tear that once seemed silent now becomes a song of triumph. Every memory of sadness is illuminated by the certainty that power acts beyond what is visible. What once seemed impossible is now a stage for a miracle. Every emotion that once seemed to break you now strengthens you, and every space of affliction fills with purpose and direction. The transformation of tears into testimony knows no limits. Every area of life once marked by suffering now rises in glory. Every obstacle that seemed to halt progress now becomes evidence that renewed faith sustains what once seemed lost. What once appeared unreachable now manifests with strength, and what once seemed extinguished revives with intensity and clarity. Every experience of sadness becomes an opportunity for manifestation. Every tear that once seemed to weaken now strengthens, every moment of discouragement now propels, and every challenge that once seemed invincible is now faced with certainty. Renewed faith acts in the invisible and manifests in the tangible, transforming what once appeared as pain into glory and what once seemed an end into the beginning of victory. Every space of life where affliction once reigned is now a stage for intervention. Every tear that seemed lost now becomes evidence of power and restoration. What once seemed impossible to recover now rises with authority. Every challenge overcome will be a living testimony that renewed faith transforms everything it touches. Every memory of defeat, every experience of pain, every tear shed is reinterpreted. What once seemed discouragement now becomes drive, what seemed vulnerability now becomes strength, and what once appeared as an end now becomes the beginning of a glorious testimony. Every step that once seemed unsure is now taken with conviction, and every area that once seemed lost now rises with purpose and clarity. Renewed faith transforms every emotion into evidence. Every instant of sadness now becomes light, every space of affliction fills with clarity, and every challenge that seemed insurmountable is faced with power. Every tear shed becomes a message of victory, and every memory of pain becomes testimony of intervention that acts beyond the natural. The miracle that transforms tears into testimony establishes a pattern of life where what once seemed weak becomes strong, what once seemed lost is recovered, and what once seemed dark is illuminated. Every experience of suffering becomes a platform of victory, and every instant of discouragement now stands as evidence of glorious intervention. Every tear becomes momentum, every sigh evidence, and every moment of sadness a testimony of renewed faith. What once seemed useless is now valuable, what once seemed defeated is now lifted, and what once seemed extinguished now burns with strength. Every area of life receives direction, clarity, and purpose, showing that the miracle of renewed faith acts with glory, strength, and authority. Nothing that once seemed painful remains without transformation. Every tear is carried into purpose. Every experience of affliction becomes evidence of strength, and every moment of discouragement is now transformed into a platform of victory. Renewed faith acts in the invisible and manifests in the tangible, showing that power transforms every space of life and that every tear shed becomes a glorious testimony of eternal intervention. Every tear that once seemed to fall without meaning now stands as evidence of victory. Every moment of sadness that once seemed endless is now a dawn of glory. Every challenge that once appeared invincible is now overcome, and every area that once seemed weak now rises with strength and purpose. Renewed faith transforms every experience of pain into a living testimony of power, victory, and glory. Forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal. Philippians 3 verse 13. You will walk with me without looking back, for every step you take is sustained by the certainty that transcends what is seen. What was left in the past no longer determines your present or your future. The shadows of what was once painful, the chains that seemed to bind you, and the memories of failures that once appeared final will have no power over the journey now established. Every experience that once seemed to hinder your progress now serves as a foundation, and every obstacle overcome becomes the cornerstone of the renewed faith that upholds each step. The past that once seemed dominant loses its strength before the clarity that propels you forward. Every mistake, every fall, every moment when it felt like everything was collapsing now becomes evidence of preparation and endurance. What once seemed to close doors now opens paths, and every situation that once appeared to limit you is transformed into a platform of momentum. Renewed faith operates in the unseen and manifests in your walk with confidence, direction, and purpose. The power that sustains your journey does not depend on your strength but on the certainty that transforms doubt into conviction. Every fear that once made you hesitate now fades away. Every insecurity that seemed to halt your advance is now replaced by clarity of vision and determination. What once appeared fragile is now strengthened, and what once seemed impossible is now attainable. Each step taken without looking back becomes a manifestation of active faith and evidence of a miracle that transcends human understanding. To walk without looking back means to advance with confidence upon ground that once seemed uncertain. Every past mistake is now a lesson guiding your direction. Every previous fall becomes a testimony of endurance. Every moment when doubt threatened to paralyze you now serves as a reminder that the impossible can be reached. Each step, each decision, and each action are filled with strength and purpose, and what once seemed to threaten your progress now fuels your growth and victory. The memories that once felt like chains are now steps that elevate. Every failure is transformed into a rung, every sorrow into a lesson, and every moment of discouragement into an opportunity for strengthening. Renewed faith turns obstacles into momentum and difficulties into evidence that life moves in harmony with the intervention that works beyond what the eyes can see. Every step without looking back reflects the authority that upholds, guides, and renews every area of your existence. Moving forward without looking back also means recognizing that every loss carries purpose. What once seemed wasted is now a seed of transformation. Every door that closed now points to the direction of what opens. Every relationship that ended, every project that seemed to fail, every opportunity that appeared lost, becomes evidence that the journey is guided by a power that transforms everything it touches. Each advance is a testimony of renewed faith, and every step reflects the certainty that nothing is lost without purpose. Walking without retreat strengthens the spirit and brings clarity to the mind. Every decision is made with authority, every action with direction, and every step with firmness. What once seemed unstable now becomes solid, and what once seemed uncertain now turns into assurance. Every place where doubt tried to take root is now occupied by conviction, and every obstacle that once seemed invincible is now overcome with confidence. Renewed faith transforms what appeared as a limit into evidence that divine power acts without restriction. The memories of failure and loss are transformed into beacons of light guiding each step. What once seemed dark is now illuminated with clarity. Every experience that seemed purposeless is now recognized as preparation for advancement and the manifestation of miracles. Renewed faith ensures that each step taken without looking back becomes a testimony of triumph. Every obstacle overcome reflects the strength that drives, guides, and sustains every movement. To walk without looking back implies liberation from everything that once restrained. Every fear, every insecurity, and every doubt that attempted to halt your advance are replaced with conviction, clarity, and strength. Each step taken becomes evidence of transformation, and each forward movement reflects the manifestation of renewed faith that sustains what once seemed lost. The journey does not depend on human sight but on the force that transforms every experience into momentum and every challenge into testimony. Renewed faith works in the unseen and manifests in the tangible. Every obstacle that once seemed to block your path is now faced with determination. Every mistake that once limited you is now your guide. Every situation that once appeared threatening is now an opportunity for growth and the manifestation of victory. What once seemed to hinder your progress now fuels every step, and what once seemed lost now rises as evidence of glorious intervention. The past loses its power when each step is taken without looking back. Every wound is transformed into a lesson, every disappointment into strength, and every fear into momentum. What once seemed a threat is now a platform for manifestation. Each step reflects confidence, direction, and purpose. Renewed faith transforms what once seemed limited into proof that the impossible becomes possible and that every challenge faced turns into a testimony of glory. Walking without looking back also means recognizing the strength that sustains. Every previous fall becomes a lesson, every mistake a guide, and every hardship an impulse. What once seemed to hinder your progress now propels you forward. What once seemed to limit you now strengthens you, and what once appeared uncertain now becomes assurance. Each step is taken with confidence, and every advance reflects the manifestation of renewed faith that sustains, guides, and transforms every area of life. The intervention that sustains your journey acts at all times. Every obstacle that once seemed insurmountable is now overcome. Every fear that once seemed to dominate now fades. Every decision that once seemed difficult is now made with clarity. Each step taken without looking back reflects strength, authority, and purpose. What once seemed impossible to sustain now stands firm, and what once seemed lost now becomes evidence of victory. Every forward movement without looking back establishes a pattern of life and testimony. Every experience that once seemed limiting becomes momentum. Every situation that once appeared dark now receives clarity and direction, and every obstacle that once seemed invincible is now faced with confidence. Renewed faith transforms what once seemed impossible into evidence of power, and every step reflects the intervention that operates with glory and authority. To walk without looking back means to move forward with clear vision. Every step is taken with direction, every action with purpose, and every decision with certainty. What once seemed weak is now strong, what once seemed uncertain is now clear, and what once seemed impossible is now within reach. Each step reflects the renewed faith that sustains and transforms, demonstrating that the miracle operates in every area of life. Every experience of the past becomes a lesson, every mistake a guide, and every fall an impulse. What once seemed to stop your advance now propels it. Every space that once seemed vulnerable is now strengthened. Every challenge that once appeared insurmountable is now faced with conviction. You will walk without looking back with renewed faith that transforms the impossible into reality and turns every step into a testimony of power, victory, and glory. The continuous forward march without retreat guarantees that every obstacle is overcome, every fear eliminated, and every challenge turned into evidence that renewed faith sustains and transforms. What once seemed a limit is now a platform. What once seemed a loss is now a discovery. And what once seemed impossible is now manifested with strength, clarity, and purpose. Every step reflects the certainty of glorious intervention and the active miracle within your life. Each step taken without looking back consolidates victory. Every past mistake becomes learning, every fall becomes momentum, and every moment of doubt becomes certainty. What once seemed to limit now strengthens, what once seemed impossible now manifests. And what once seemed lost is now evidence of renewed faith. You will walk with direction, assurance, and purpose, leaving behind shadows and embracing the manifestation of miracles and glory in every step. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Philippians 4 verse 8. I make all things new within you, transforming what once seemed worn, broken, or stagnant into a fountain of life and strength. Every corner of your spirit that once felt dry is now filled with renewal. What once seemed impossible now unfolds as a stage for miracles. The darkness that once invaded your thoughts is replaced with clarity. The exhaustion that once drained your energy is now filled with vigor that does not fade. Everything that once seemed lost finds purpose, and every inner space receives a breath of renewal that completely revitalizes it. Every emotion that once felt shattered is restored with precision and beauty. Every wound that once seemed to leave permanent scars is now woven into experience that elevates you. What once felt empty is now filled with hope. What once seemed useless is now transformed into active strength. Every discouraging thought becomes an opportunity for clarity and growth. Every fragment of your inner being that once felt weak is now strengthened with direction and purpose. Renewed faith moves through all that was dormant, awakening hidden potential and filling the soul with vision and determination. The memories that once seemed anchors of defeat are now foundations of transformation. Every experience that once appeared to leave a permanent mark of failure is now reintegrated as teaching and motivation. What once seemed shadow is now guiding light, and what once felt like weakness becomes evidence of strength and resilience. The renewal taking place within you is neither temporary nor superficial. It acts deeply in your spirit, affecting your heart, your mind, and your will. Every thought of doubt is replaced with steadfast certainty. What once seemed fragile is now unbreakable, and what once seemed dim now burns with clarity and purpose. Every negative emotion that tried to dominate your inner world is consumed and replaced with strength, faith, and conviction. Every place where hopelessness once sought to settle is now filled with direction and confidence. What once seemed impossible to change is now completely transformed, and every area of your inner life aligns with purpose that transcends what is seen. The power working within you knows no limits. Every cell of your being, every thought, and every emotion are subject to the intervention that renews and revitalizes. What once seemed stagnant now turns into motion. What once seemed closed now opens, and what once appeared to be an end now becomes the beginning of a new era of active faith. The renewal is not limited to the exterior but penetrates to the deepest part of your being, creating coherence, strength, and clarity in every area that once felt vulnerable. Every tear shed, every pain felt, and every experience that once seemed dark now turns into evidence of growth and transformation. What once appeared to be defeat is now a platform for advancement. Every emotion that once felt harmful or useless now becomes strength that drives, guides, and inspires. Renewed faith moves in the deepest parts of the being, awakening what once was asleep and activating energy that renews vision, passion, and purpose. What once seemed fragmented is now rebuilt with precision and glory. Every corner of your inner being receives attention and transformation. What once appeared damaged is now turned into strength, and what once seemed useless is now evidence that nothing is left without purpose. Every space where doubt tried to dwell is now overtaken by clarity and faith, and every area of your inner life reflects the manifestation of renewal that activates miracles and strengthens hope. Renewed faith ignites power where there once was weakness. Every thought that once felt negative is now replaced by clarity and conviction. Every feeling that once felt empty is filled with purpose and direction. What once seemed impossible to sustain now becomes a firm foundation, and every area of your inner life aligns with the plan that turns weakness into strength, dullness into brilliance, and brokenness into wholeness. Every memory of failure and every sensation of loss are reintegrated as proof of growth. What once seemed an ending is now a beginning, and what once seemed limiting now becomes a platform for progress. Renewal works in the unseen, and every thought, emotion, and reaction is transformed to reflect strength, clarity, and determination that define renewed faith. Every area of your being is strengthened, every decision is guided, and every action is supported with power and purpose. Every space where fear once lived is now filled with security and conviction. Every fragment of anxiety is replaced by assurance and clarity. What once seemed a barrier is now transformed into momentum. The renewal taking place within you allows every emotion, thought, and decision to align with the manifestation of miracles and victory. Every area of your inner life, once vulnerable, now reflects strength, direction, and clarity that surpasses human understanding. Every moment of doubt or fear that once tried to rule now becomes evidence of transformation. What once seemed impossible to change is now completely renewed. Every corner of your inner being is filled with strength, clarity, and purpose. Renewed faith activates energy that refreshes vision, transforms emotions, and guides thoughts toward the manifestation of miracles and victory in every area of your life. What once seemed exhaustion is now vigor. What once seemed apathy is now passion. Every emotion that once felt extinguished now burns with clarity, conviction, and determination. Every thought that once felt weak is now strong, and every corner of your being that once seemed empty is now filled with direction and purpose. The renewal working within you has no limits and transforms every space of your inner life into evidence of active faith and constant miracle. Every experience that once seemed a loss is now evidence of growth. What once appeared stagnant now becomes movement. What once appeared an ending now becomes a beginning, and what once seemed impossible now manifests with clarity and strength. Renewed faith activates strength in the unseen and manifests in the visible, transforming every emotion, thought, and decision into evidence of renewal, power, and purpose. Every area that once seemed broken is now rebuilt with precision. Every space that once felt empty is now filled with clarity and direction. Every corner that once felt vulnerable is now strengthened, and every emotion that once seemed debilitating now becomes evidence of the power at work. Renewed faith transforms everything it touches, turning weakness into strength, dullness into brilliance, and what was lost into a platform of manifestation and victory. Every thought that once seemed negative, every emotion that once felt useless, and every memory that once felt painful now come together as testimony of renewal and growth. What once seemed impossible to sustain is now a firm foundation of strength and purpose. Every area of your inner life reflects evidence of glorious intervention and active miracle. Every corner, every emotion, and every thought are renewed to manifest faith, clarity, strength, and victory. Every fragment that once seemed lost now rises as evidence of transformation. What once seemed impossible to restore is now testimony of strength, clarity, and purpose. Every inner space, every emotion, and every thought are renewed and strengthened. The faith that ignites transforms weakness into stability, dullness into clarity, and loss into opportunity. Every corner of your inner life is evidence that the impossible is attainable and that renewal is constant, glorious, and triumphant. Every emotion that once felt worthless now has purpose. Every thought that once felt empty now has direction. And every space that once felt broken now reflects strength and clarity. Renewed faith works in the unseen and manifests in the visible, transforming every area of your inner life into evidence of miracle, power, and victory. What once seemed stagnation is now momentum, what once seemed ending is now beginning, and what once seemed weak now manifests with authority and glory. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. John 1 verse 5. You will live in fullness, for my fire does not go out. Every area of your life that seemed extinguished, every hope that felt lost, will be rekindled with an intensity that transcends human understanding. What once appeared to be a time of stillness now becomes a season of abundance and clarity. Every corner of your being fills with purpose, direction, and victory. The weariness that once invaded your spirit will be replaced by boundless energy, and every space that seemed weak now burns with strength and determination. Every emotion that once carried fear or insecurity transforms into confidence and conviction. The anxiety that tried to dominate is replaced with clarity and certainty. Every thought that once doubted the future now aligns with vision and purpose. What seemed like stagnation turns into steady progress, and what was dim now shines with renewed brilliance. Fullness is not merely the presence of abundance, but the manifestation of strength, clarity, and direction that sustains every decision, every action, and every step. Every defeat that once appeared permanent now becomes evidence of strength and resilience. What seemed to be a definitive end now turns into the beginning of a glorious testimony. Every area of your life where doubt, discouragement, or sadness once ruled is now filled with direction, clarity, and victory. Fullness manifests in every place that once seemed limited. Every loss that felt irreversible now becomes an opportunity, and every challenge that seemed insurmountable is now faced with power and confidence. The fire that does not go out transforms everything it touches. Every negative thought is replaced by certainty, every weakening emotion turns into motivation, and every corner of your being receives renewed strength. What once seemed impossible now unfolds with clarity, and every obstacle that appeared to block your path becomes proof of power and victory. Fullness is not measured by visible success, but by the deep transformation within that sustains every aspect of your existence. Every memory of failure now becomes the foundation of strength. What once seemed wasted time now transforms into proof of preparation. Every fall that once felt final is now a step toward victory. Every challenge that seemed too great becomes an opportunity for manifestation. Fullness is reflected in the strength that rises, in the clarity that illuminates, and in the determination that propels every step forward. What once felt weak is now indestructible, and what seemed extinguished now burns with light that cannot be quenched. Every fear that once dominated is now consumed by conviction and certainty. The doubt that once appeared invincible now fades away, and every thought that seemed limited now expands with clarity and purpose. What seemed extinguished now burns with strength, and every space that once lacked direction now overflows with vision. Fullness manifests not only through visible achievements but through profound transformation that awakens strength, clarity, and determination to sustain every challenge and overcome every obstacle. Every loss becomes discovery, and every obstacle turns into a platform of victory. What once felt like inactivity is now a season of abundance. Every area that once seemed meaningless now overflows with purpose and direction. Every emotion that once felt weak now becomes evidence of strength, and every uncertain thought now reflects clarity and conviction. The fire burning within you will not be extinguished, and every step is taken with assurance, direction, and confidence. Every challenge that once seemed invincible is now faced with power. Every area of your life that seemed fragile now grows strong. Every memory of doubt or fear transforms into evidence of growth and active faith. What once seemed impossible is now within reach, and every space that once appeared lost now becomes evidence of intervention and victory. Fullness is revealed in the ability to overcome all things, in the clarity that lights all things, and in the strength that drives everything toward purpose and fulfillment. Every emotion that once seemed dull now burns with clarity and determination. Every thought that once seemed limited now expands with vision and purpose. Every experience that once felt like loss now stands as proof of strength and transformation. What once seemed unsustainable is now held firm, and every corner of your life now reflects the manifestation of renewed faith and active miracle. Fullness becomes a constant state, not a temporary one, and every aspect of your existence reflects direction, strength, and victory. Every instant where doubt or fear once threatened now becomes evidence of certainty and clarity. Every space of your life that once seemed weak is now a fortress, and every memory of discouragement is now a lesson of growth. What was once dim now burns, and every step forward reflects manifestation of fullness, strength, and victory. The light burning within you cannot be extinguished, and every area of your life becomes tangible evidence of active miracle and renewed faith. Every thought of fear is now replaced with conviction. Every emotion of insecurity becomes motivation. Every area that once felt fragile now strengthens with power, clarity, and direction. What once seemed impossible now unfolds, and every step forward reveals manifestation of fullness that sustains, propels, and renews. Every challenge is met with confidence, and every achievement reflects enduring strength and victory. Every memory of failure now integrates as teaching and evidence of triumph. Every space that once seemed weak now fills with strength. Every emotion that once seemed dim now burns with clarity, and every thought that seemed limited now reflects vision and purpose. What once seemed lost now becomes found, and every step taken reflects the manifestation of fullness, renewed faith, and constant miracle. Every area of your life that once seemed limited now expands with purpose. Every challenge that once appeared invincible is now faced with power, and every obstacle that once seemed to halt your progress becomes proof of strength and victory. Every emotion that once seemed fragile is now fortified. Every thought that once appeared dim now burns with clarity, and every corner of your being reflects the manifestation of fullness that cannot be extinguished. Every space that once felt vulnerable now stands as fortitude. Every moment that once seemed like loss now becomes proof of advancement. Every memory that once felt painful is now testimony of active intervention and constant miracle. What was once dim now burns, and every step forward reflects strength, clarity, and purpose. Fullness manifests in everything you touch, in every decision you make, and in every action you take. Every emotion that once seemed limited now expands with clarity and conviction. Every thought that once seemed weak is now strong, and every corner of your life that once lacked direction now carries purpose. What once seemed impossible now unfolds with strength, and every step reveals manifestation of fullness, renewed faith, and continuous miracle. The light that burns within you will never fade, and every area of your life reflects victory, purpose, and glory. Every challenge overcome strengthens every part of your being. Every memory of failure now serves as the foundation of victory, and every obstacle becomes proof of strength. What once felt weak is now unbreakable, and what once seemed dim now burns with light that cannot be extinguished. Every step taken reveals manifestation of fullness, renewed faith, and active miracle that transforms everything it touches. Every space of your life that once felt dark is now filled with clarity. Every emotion that once seemed dull now burns with intensity. Every thought that once seemed limited now expands with purpose. Fullness manifests in every action, every decision, and every step, proving that the fire dwelling within you cannot be extinguished, and that every part of your life reflects strength, victory, and the glorious manifestation of miracle.